Welcome to a place where highways fold into themselves, where pine forests swallow the familiar whole, and where something massive walks between the trees, hunting those foolish enough to take the wrong exit. They always tell you to trust your GPS, to follow the blue line on the screen like it's gospel, like technology can't lie. But what happens when the road you're driving on simply vanishes from the map? What happens when you realize you've turned onto an exit that shouldn't exist? And there's no way back? My name doesn't matter anymore. Not after what happened. But my friend T and I learned something that cold. October evening in Massachusetts. Some roads are designed to trap you. And once you're on them, the only question is whether you'll escape before whatever lives there catches up. T and I met in freshman year of high school. Two kids who bonded over late-night study sessions and an unhealthy obsession with proving we were smarter than everyone else in the room. By the time we hit MIT, we were inseparable. He was the stubborn one, 5'9" of pure defiance, wrapped in a lean, muscular frame that had won him more bar fights than I could count. Black, sharp-featured, with eyes that could cut through bullshit faster than a laser through paper. T was the kind of guy who'd walk into hell itself if someone told him he couldn't. Me? I was his opposite in almost every way. 6'2", lanky Asian, with dyed green hair that my parents hated, and a personality that preferred chess halls to confrontation. Where T was the immovable object, I was the guy who'd rather calculate the odds of survival than throw a punch. Virgin versus Giga Chad, as he loved to remind me. But we balanced each other out. And that's why when he suggested we take a weekend trip to some obscure vacation spot on the outskirts of Massachusetts, I didn't hesitate to say yes. The plan was simple. Take the highway north. Enjoy 2 days of hiking and terrible jokes. Then head back Sunday night to prepare for Monday's exam hell. We'd done trips like this before. Small escapes from the suffocating pressure of MIT. Moments where we could pretend we were just two regular guys instead of scholarship students carrying the weight of expectations on our backs. The weather was perfect that Friday afternoon. Cool and crisp with that distinctly. New England bite in the air that promised winter wasn't far behind. I'd gotten my Lincoln checked out 3 days prior. A full inspection that gave me the green light for the trip. Fresh oil change, new brake pads, everything running smooth as silk. T loaded his duffel into the trunk, tossed his phone onto the dashboard mount with the GPS already fired up, and we hit the road with classic rock blasting through the speakers and not a care in the world. For the first hour, everything was exactly as it should be. We talked about classes, complained about professors who seemed to enjoy watching us suffer, debated whether the new superhero movie was actually good or just expensive garbage. The highway stretched out before us, familiar and unchanging. The same route we'd driven dozens of times to visit, friends or escape campus for a night. T was navigating, his finger occasionally swiping across the GPS screen as he tracked our progress. That's when he said it, casual as asking me to pass the aux cord. Exit 60 coming up. Take the right lane. I glanced at him, my hands tightening slightly on the steering wheel. Exit 60. I'd driven this highway at least 30 times in the past 2 years. Memorized every exit, every rest stop, every weird billboard advertising fireworks or discount furniture. There was no exit 60. I opened my mouth to tell him he'd misread it, that the GPS was glitching, but then I saw it. Rising up ahead on the right side of the highway, clear as day, was a green sign with bold white letters, Exit 60. My brain stuttered. It shouldn't be there. It couldn't be there. But there it was, solid and real. The exit ramp curving away from the highway and disappearing into a thick wall of pine forest. T looked at me, raising an eyebrow. You gonna take it or just stare at it? I didn't answer. Some instinct deep in my gut was screaming at me to keep driving, to stay on the highway where things made sense, but logic overrode it. The GPS said to take exit 60. The sign was right there. Maybe I'd just forgotten about it. Maybe I'd always taken a different route without realizing this exit existed. I flicked on my turn signal and eased the Lincoln into the right lane, the tires humming as we transitioned from highway to exit ramp. The curve was sharp, tighter than most exits, and as we descended, I felt the world shift slightly, like dropping down into a valley where the air pressure changed. The pines closed in immediately, towering and dense, their branches forming a canopy overhead that blocked out most of the late afternoon sun. The road beneath us was smooth, almost too smooth, the asphalt looking freshly paved despite the remoteness of the area. No potholes, no cracks, just perfect black road cutting through an endless sea of green. We drove in silence for a while, T's eyes fixed on his phone screen while I focused on the road ahead. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3. The forest didn't change, didn't thin out or open up into the farmland and small towns that should have been dotting the landscape. Just pines, endless and identical. Their trunks so close together that I couldn't see more than a few feet into the woods on either side of us. 4 miles. 5. That's when I realized we hadn't passed a single car. Not one vehicle coming from the opposite direction, no trucks hauling goods, no soccer moms in minivans, nothing. The road was completely deserted, and more unsettling than that, there were no signs. No mile markers, no warnings about curves or deer crossings, no indicators of what town or county we were passing through. Just road and trees and an increasingly heavy silence that even the car's engine seemed hesitant to brake. I glanced at T. He'd gone pale, his usual confident posture replaced by something rigid and tense. His hands were shaking slightly as they gripped his phone, and his eyes had that wide, fixed quality of someone who just realized something was very, very wrong. "You okay, dude?" I asked, my voice sounding too loud in the confined space of the car. "You don't look too well. Need me to pull over?" T didn't respond immediately. He just slowly, mechanically lifted his phone and turned the screen toward me. I looked, my jaw dropped. The GPS showed our car as a blue dot sitting in the middle of a solid green expanse. No road, no exit 60, no indication that we were on anything other than somehow driving straight through undeveloped forest. The blue line of the highway we'd been on was visible in the distance, but between our position and that highway was nothing but topographic green, as if the road we were currently driving on simply didn't exist in the digital world. I felt my heart rate spike. That primal part of the brain that recognizes danger before the conscious mind can process it. I jerked the wheel slightly, pulling the Lincoln over to the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires as we came to a stop. I grabbed the phone from T's hands, ignoring his weak protest, and zoomed in on our location. The detail didn't change. We were off-map, off-grid, in a place that, according to every satellite and surveying, technology didn't have a road. "This isn't right," I said, hearing the edge of panic in my own voice. "There should be a road here. We're literally on a road." T had found his voice again, that familiar stubborn anger rising up to combat the fear. "No shit, Sherlock. The road just disappeared from the GPS. What about the exit? Is exit 60 still there?" I scrolled back toward the highway, following the path we should have taken, and felt my blood run cold. Exit 60 was gone. The highway showed exits 59 and 61, the numbers jumping over what we'd just driven through as if that exit had never existed at all. I looked up at T, saw my own fear reflected in his eyes, and made a decision. "We're going back." I didn't wait for his agreement. I yanked the gear shift into reverse, cranked the wheel, and executed a sloppy but effective three-point turn that left us facing back the way we'd come. The tires squealed slightly as I punched the accelerator, the Lincoln leaping forward as we raced back toward where the highway should be. The trees blurred past, identical and endless, and I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, waiting for that curve back up to the highway to appear. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, 4. We should have been back by now. The exit ramp couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 miles long. 5 miles, 6 miles. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. and I could hear T's breathing getting faster beside me. 7 miles, 8 miles. I slammed on the brakes, the anti-lock system juddering as we skidded to a stop in the middle of the road. The smell of hot rubber filled the car. T was shouting something, asking what the hell I was doing, why I'd nearly given him a concussion, but I couldn't respond. I could only stare ahead at what should have been there, but wasn't. The highway was gone. The exit ramp that should have curved back up to rejoin it had simply vanished, replaced by more straight, perfect road cutting through more identical pines. It was impossible. The road had been completely straight. No turns, no forks, no way we could have missed it. But the highway had disappeared like it had been erased from reality. T followed my gaze, and his protests died in his throat. "Did you take a wrong turn?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain in a way I'd never heard from him before. I shook my head slowly. "The road's been straight the whole time. No turns. No curves, just straight." "Then where the fuck is the highway?" His voice was rising now, panic starting to override that stubborn defiance. "Where the fuck are we?" I checked the GPS again, desperately hoping that maybe it had corrected itself, that the satellites had realigned or whatever. Technical explanation could make this make sense. But the screen showed the same thing as before, a blue dot in an ocean of green. The highway now even further away than it had been, as if we'd been driving deeper into nowhere instead of back toward civilization. "We're lost," T said quietly, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. "Hold on," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Maybe we did take a wrong turn somehow. Let's keep going forward. This road has to lead somewhere." T didn't argue. What else could we do? Sitting still felt like giving up. And neither of us were the type to surrender without exhausting every option. I eased the car back into drive and we continued forward. The sun sinking lower on the horizon and casting long shadows across the road. The pines seemed taller now, their trunks thicker, the canopy overhead more oppressive. It had to be a trick of the fading light. The way dusk could distort perception and make the familiar seem alien. But even telling myself that, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was changing around us, growing larger and more ancient with each passing mile. We drove for what felt like hours, though when I checked the clock I realized only 45 minutes had passed since we'd turned around. Time was doing something strange here, stretching and compressing in ways that made me question my own perception. That's when I noticed something else wrong. Something that sent a fresh spike of ice through my chest. The gas gauge. It was still reading 80%. Exactly where it had been when we'd first pulled over. With the amount of driving we'd done, racing back and forth, we should have burned through at least a quarter of the tank. But the needle hadn't moved at all, frozen in place as if the laws of combustion and fuel consumption had simply stopped applying. "Did you hear that?" T's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "Hear what?" "Like a thumping sound." From outside, I listened, straining my ears over the low hum of the engine and the whisper of tires on asphalt. Nothing at first, just the ambient silence of the forest. Then I heard it. A low, rhythmic thump, distant but distinct, like something heavy impacting the ground. My first thought was construction equipment. Maybe a pile driver or excavator working somewhere in the woods. But that made no sense. We hadn't seen any signs of human activity. No buildings or clearings or side roads leading to development sites. The thumping continued, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "You sure your car's okay?" he asked, his voice tight with tension. "Got it checked 3 days ago. Everything was perfect." The thumping grew louder, more distinct, and I realized it wasn't coming from the car at all. It was external, echoing through the trees from somewhere behind us. Not random impacts, but deliberate, rhythmic, like footsteps. Massive footsteps. I glanced in the rearview mirror and my heart stopped. Something was there. Far back on the road, barely visible in the deepening twilight, was a shape. It was huge, taller than the trees lining the road, moving with a gait that seemed both impossibly slow and terrifyingly fast. I couldn't make out details. Couldn't process what I was seeing into any recognizable form. It was just wrongness given physical shape, a violation of nature walking on legs that bent in directions legs shouldn't bend. "Dude, I think the cars," T started to say, still looking at his phone. "Drive," I whispered. "What? Drive!" T screamed, his head snapping up to look in the side mirror. He'd seen it too. I didn't think. I just moved, my foot slamming down on the accelerator with every ounce of force I could muster. The Lincoln's engine roared, the 8 cylinders firing with desperate intensity as we rocketed forward. The speedometer needle climbed 60, 70, 80, 90. The thumping behind us grew faster, louder, keeping pace with our acceleration. Whatever that thing was, it was chasing us, and it was fast. Too fast for something that size. The laws of physics were breaking down around us, and I didn't care about understanding why. I only cared about getting away. T was screaming, a constant stream of profanity and prayer mixing together into something incoherent. I'd never seen him scared before, not really scared. Not the bone-deep terror that stripped away every defense and left. Nothing but the animal need to survive. But he was scared now, his hands braced against the dashboard. His body pressed back into the seat as if he could somehow push us to go faster through sheer force of will. I looked in the rearview mirror again and immediately wished I hadn't. The thing was closer now. Close enough that I could make out vague details. It walked upright but hunched, its body massive and distorted, covered in something that looked like bark or scales or rotting flesh. I couldn't tell. Its arms were too long, dragging along the ground as it ran, each impact of those appendages creating the thumping sound we'd heard. But worst of all was its face, or what should have been its face. It was featureless except for a gaping mouth. And from that mouth came a sound that made my blood freeze. The slowed, distorted wail of a crying baby, pitched down into something that resonated in my chest and made my vision blur with primal horror. The speedometer hit 100, 110, 120. I'd never driven this fast in my life, never pushed my Lincoln anywhere close to its limits, and the car was shaking with the strain, the steering wheel vibrating in my hands as we hurtled down that impossibly straight road. But it wasn't enough. The thing was still gaining, its massive strides eating up the distance between us with methodical certainty. T had stopped screaming words and was just screaming now, pure sound without meaning, and I found myself joining him, both of us shrieking into the darkness as death lumbered after us. Then I saw it. Far ahead, barely visible in the beam of the headlights, was a change in the road, an upward curve, the first deviation from straightness we'd seen since entering this nightmare. "There!" I shouted, pointing ahead with one hand while the other kept the wheel steady. "We're gonna make it!" T saw it too, and his screaming took on a different quality, hope mixing with terror as that curve grew closer. Half a mile, quarter mile. The thing behind us roared, that baby cry sound reaching a crescendo that seemed to shake the very air. And I felt, rather than saw it lunge forward for one final attempt to catch us. And then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The roaring ceased. The thumping vanished. The oppressive weight that had been pressing down on us lifted all at once. And I risked another glance in the mirror. The road behind us was empty. The creature was gone. Not retreating or giving up, but simply absent, as if it had never existed at all. The curve was right there. I forced myself to ease off the accelerator, bringing us down from 120 to a more manageable 60 as we hit the upward slope. The angle was steep, almost impossibly steep for a standard road, and I felt the Lincoln strain as we climbed. Then, without any transition or warning, we were back. The curve leveled out, and suddenly we were on the highway, merging into the right lane as if we'd just come off a normal exit. Cars surrounded us. Regular people in regular vehicles going about their regular evening commutes. Headlights and taillights stretched out in both directions. The digital signs overhead announced we were 70 miles from Boston. Everything was normal. Everything was real. I jerked the wheel right and pulled. Onto the shoulder, the Lincoln skidding slightly as I brought us to a stop. Horns blared as other drivers swerved around us, probably assuming we were drunk or having car trouble, but I didn't care. I couldn't drive anymore. My hands were shaking too badly, my whole body trembling with adrenaline crash and relief and residual terror. We sat there in silence for several minutes, both of us panting like we'd run a marathon, staring straight ahead at nothing. Then T started to laugh. It was a strangled, slightly hysterical sound, but it was laughter. "Holy shit, dude," he gasped out between chuckles. "What the hell just happened?" I found myself laughing too, the absurdity of it all bubbling up despite the horror we'd just experienced. "I have no fucking clue." We laughed together, the sound filling the car and pushing back the darkness. Two idiots who'd somehow survived something impossible and couldn't quite process it yet. The laughter eventually died down, leaving us in exhausted silence. I was reaching for the ignition, planning to restart the car and find the nearest motel so we could sleep for about 16 hours straight, when I saw the flashing lights pull up in front of us, a Massachusetts State Patrol cruiser. Its light bar, cycling through red and blue, rolled to a stop just ahead of our position. The driver's door opened and an officer stepped out, and I felt a weird sense of relief at seeing another human being, someone official and normal who represented the world we just returned to. He approached my window with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. As I rolled down the window, he leaned down slightly to look at us, and I noticed he had a thick accent, Australian maybe, which struck me as odd but not alarming. People ended up in all sorts of places for all sorts of reasons. "You two kids all right?" he asked, his eyes scanning over us with what seemed like genuine concern. "You look like you've just seen Satan himself." "Officer," I said, my voice hoarse from screaming. "You have no idea. Saw you pulled over. Figured you might need some assistance. Need a lift somewhere?" "We're good," I assured him. We're good. You know where the nearest motel is?" He pointed down the highway, his gesture casual and helpful. "Just a few miles down here and take a left at the intersection. Can't miss it." "Thanks." "No problem at all." He gave us a friendly nod and turned to walk back to his patrol car. I watched him in my side mirror as he opened his door, and that's when I saw it. The number stenciled on the side of his cruiser, just above the state seal. Massachusetts State Patrol number 060. I felt all the warmth drain from my body. T saw it too. I heard his sharp intake of breath beside me. The officer got into his car, gave us a wave, and pulled back onto the highway, his taillights disappearing into the flow of traffic. We sat there, frozen, as the implications washed over us. No, 060, exit, 60, the exit that didn't exist. The exit that had vanished from every map. The exit that had led us into whatever hell we'd just escaped. And here was an officer, a representative of the state itself, bearing that same number like a badge or a warning or a signature. T and I looked at each other, and in that moment we had a silent conversation that conveyed more than words ever could. We weren't safe. We'd gotten out, but we weren't safe. Whatever that road was, whatever lived there, it had connections to this world. Tendrils that reached into the normal and real and corrupted it from within. The officer was a reminder, a message that we'd been marked by something vast and incomprehensible, something that existed in the spaces, between roads and the gaps in maps, where rational reality broke down and revealed the horror underneath. I still drive that highway sometimes. I have to. There's no other way to get north without adding 4 hours to the trip. But I never take my eyes off the exits anymore. I count them obsessively, watching the numbers increment. 58, 59, 61, 62. Never 60. It's never there when I'm looking for it. Never appears on any map I check. But sometimes in my peripheral vision, I catch a glimpse of green and white. A sign that shouldn't exist marking an exit that leads nowhere good. And on those drives, I keep my foot steady on the accelerator and my hands tight on the wheel, because I know that if I ever see that sign, straight on again. If I ever take that curve down into the pines, I might not be lucky enough to escape a second time. They say some roads don't exist on any map. They say some places trap you forever. And they say that if you ever see exit 60, you should drive past it as fast as you can and never, ever look back. Because some doors once opened can never truly be closed again.